because I do believe that the more you know, the easier to, again, it's that muscle. The more you have in your mind about it and you're aware of it, the easier it is to kind of implement. And it's little things. Start with like making your headlines short and keeping them in one spot and using brand colors. Like those can make a really big difference.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. It's not often that I have somebody on the show who is truly an extraordinary visual person who helps people make extraordinary presentations for their businesses. So Emily Schneider, I'm really excited to have you on the show and dive into this topic.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here too. So nice to join you.
Let's talk about your background. As you said, you started out with a Sweet 16 invitation, and that was the start of your love for design.
Yeah. So I guess it actually started earlier, my love of design, because I was just like this. I use the term now. When I was younger, I didn't know how to express it, but I was creatively curious. My mom described it as I just broke a lot of things. But really what I was doing is I would touch things and I would look at them and I would move them around to see how they would work. But I'm also a klutz. And so things would fall out of my hand, or like I would put it back and it wouldn't be right. And then I remember there was a glass shop we used to go to for like gifts for like my mom would buy like vases and things like, I don't know. She was always buying these gifts. And like, I wasn't allowed in there after a while. Like I had to like sit outside. But the whole point was like, how are these things made? How are these like delicate shapes put together? And so I was always this creative person. I was really good at making things, building things. But for some reason, around the time of my Sweet 16, I think that's when we got like a new computer, because I vividly, especially like you said, I'm a visual person. Like I vividly remember our computer room, the wallpaper, the shape of our desk, the color, like all these like very detailed things. But I wanted to explore, and I think it wasn't like Corel Paint or Word, like it was not a design program, but I decided to design something. And I remember printing it out, again, those printers that you had to like line up the holes and then rip the edges off, ripping it up and like showing it to my parents. And I remember the way that they smiled and how excited they were and how excited I was to design something. And questionable fonts, terrible colors, like it was bad. But what it did is it showed me that I could make something, create a connection with people, and then they showed up and I had a fabulous super special Sweet 16. Yeah. And that was the first piece I ever like actually designed that I gave to people, that wasn't an art class project. So yeah.
Amazing. And then you went on to pursue visual storytelling, branding, graphic.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of launched me into like being really curious about being like doing art. And so I kept asking and getting more involved. And I studied a lot of art in high school. They had just launched again, this was like 20-30 years ago. So like they had their first computer art class and I like got into it. And I mean, I still have some of my art pieces. My mom still has them hanging up, and it's so funny to see how things have changed, but it got me going. And I realized that I loved making things. I loved building. I was a visual person, and the computer is a great platform for me because I don't get super messy, or I'm a recovering perfectionist. So there's the ability to like align things perfectly, but also like make changes without it, without like this whole detriment to timeline. I studied visual communications in college at University of Kansas, then spent about 15 years in the marketing industry, and then have been on my own for the last 6 doing this kind of work.
What propelled you to go from doing all this work, being, a senior art director in multiple organizations, to saying, I can do this on my own, and that's what I want to do?
There were 2 moments within a year. So I started freelancing like for a while for a startup, a tech startup. They were using GPS technology to track user behavior so that they could sell it again to marketers, so they could understand how people are, so they could change ad buys or be more direct with their ads. So it all was like linking back up to like consumer behaviors, getting somebody to do something, to feel something, and then to take action. And that's what shopper marketing is all about. That's where I did a lot of my marketing work. And I loved it. I loved presentation designs. I loved it from when I started in the agency world. I left being part of the thought leadership, even though I was like a fly on the wall, taking notes or just like moving pixels around in a presentation. I just loved this canvas and this ability to tell a story and showcase work that had been done. And I loved that I got time with the leaders. So I was learning and I was like, and I understood strategy and I was like, oh, I always loved having an intention and purpose for things anyway. So it really just started to like put all the pieces together. And so after freelancing for those guys for about 18 months, they asked me to come on board as their brand manager and marketing lead to help continue to build their pitch presentations and do a lot of still marketing stuff, but some of their design work. And it was perfect timing for me and where I was in life. And it got me out of the agency kind of hustle and grind. I think my son was 2 at that time. And so it was great. It was perfect fit. And then about 8 months later, a year later, they let me know that like they couldn't afford me anymore. And so I was, kind of let go, laid off, all in good terms. But like, that's what happens when you have a startup. Like if things changed, I was a role that was not crucial to the development. And so it put me in a spot that I had never been before. And I realized that I never wanted to go back to working the way I was. I also was laid off at 8.5 months pregnant with my second child. So it just like timing just kind of put me in a different space. It was scary. I'm sure I have PTSD from it. But what it made me realize is like I have important decisions. And so the rug got pulled out and I decided to go with it. One thing that I've always been passionate about is like, would I bet on myself is a question I asked. Do I believe in myself? And probably most 100% of the time, the answer is like, for sure. Heck yeah. So why not? So like, see what happens. And my husband was on board. And so I put my feelers out and I started telling people I was freelancing. That was 6 years ago. I haven't stopped. It's evolved. And like I said, 15 months ago, I niched myself to presentation design because this is what I love doing. And there is being a niche designer like this and helping people elevate their stories, simplify the complexity, and create these pieces that then can be turnkey or be used or just have such an impact. It's so fun to make people happy and to make their work easier. And like, it's just a win-win for me and for my client.
I love that you figured out what you really wanted to hone in on and that you took the chance on yourself, because I think that's what stops so many people is knowing that they have to take a leap.
Yes.
Somewhat unknown. You did have people you could reach out to as client base, but it's all your own business. You're responsible for every decision. You have to rebrand yourself in a way, right? As your own entity.
And you continue to do. Like I can, like from when I started 5 years ago and I was like, and then you have to get over the whole hump of like, do I want to tell people that I'm available? Like, isn't that kind of right? Like, because you want to be in demand and like, is it sad to say I'm a freelancer and I have availability? Well, I shunned that away. Like, no, Emily, like you need to. And now part of my daily habits are reaching out to 20 new connections on LinkedIn and just sharing that I do the work I do. And would they be open for a conversation? Some people say yes, some people just connect. But if I don't tell people that I do this and that I'm available, how do they know that I'm here to help them? Like, that's been my mindset. So I haven't stopped. And I can tell you every time I get on a call with somebody, they're like, I didn't know people like you existed. I'm like, I know, isn't it amazing? I'm so happy. I'm so happy we're connected. Like I love when like the universe collides and like all these bright lights start to shine. And so it's awesome. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of answered a couple of my questions. One was you said you had, you had a lot of people you could reach out to. So you obviously had really good word of mouth, referrals. So I was going to ask if that was the main driver or if then you had to reach out and start promoting yourself more deeply. And it sounds like
both, to be honest. Yeah. So I got really lucky where like when I first went out on my own, because that's like the scariest part is like, you're going to go on your own. And like, I had a mentor. He's not, I shouldn't say he's old, but I've known him for a long time. He's older. So sorry, Scott, but like, he's good. We're good. So he kind of like was like, Emily, I got a role for you. This is what it can look like. You can determine that because he knew I was a new mom as well with my second baby. Like, what do you need? Let's make it work. And so he kind of gave me that little bit of like that bridge to figure it out, but that security to know that like, if I needed a week of 15 hours, that was okay. I just had to be, or if and he knew how I worked. So because when you start to have new clients, for me, it's like there's an onboarding and like, what are they going to expect? And do they know how we work? And so that was a good start. And then it became a little bit of word of mouth. And then I'm going to be honest, at the beginning of 2023, I had a 3-month contract with a client. And in January, 3 months left. And they were like, my first week of January, they're like, we have to terminate. Our books are changing, and we need to get rid of all of our consultants. It changed everything. But what I kept doing is I kept getting curious. I kept asking questions. And to your point, I kept asking, like, what can I do? How do I tell people? And at that point too, because I'd been doing it for a while, I had a better network of mentors and supports. I reached out to them. I started having, I call them curious conversations, where I reached out to people who were doing work like me, who were doing different work, who I'd worked with in the past, who were old clients. And I just literally asked for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. What were they working on? What was inspiring them? What did they get excited about? It wasn't about promoting what I was doing. It was really just saying, I'm just in a spot where I'm trying to get something or figure it out. And I know when I hear people and their excitement, it starts to spin wheels. And those curious conversations led me to be opening to reading a book where I discovered this term zone of genius. And here I am.
Yeah. And this tells me, and it should tell everybody who's listening, that it's not just because I teach grad school as well. This is something we always recommend to our students. I say, I'll open up any of my connections on LinkedIn or elsewhere to you, but you have to know what the ask is. And it's usually they want to have just an informational conversation. But I love the fact that you are saying this isn't something you just do when you're in school and trying to figure out what you want to do next. But at any stage in your business, this is a great technique to make those connections. You're not selling something. You're just having an honest introduction, talking about what's going on in the industry, meeting with like minds who may do something slightly different than you. And that does lead to forming more connections, people thinking about you when they have projects that are not in their wheelhouse.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best questions I got asked a couple of months ago, and now I bring it on all the time. Whatever conversation is, you follow it up with like, how can I help you? What do you need? Right? Is it a connection? Is it just you need 10 minutes to like brainstorm an idea? Or like, what can I do to support you? And those are great questions in those, I call them discovery calls now too, because it's like, I know what you need, you know what I need, but is there something that we're missing? And it's funny, a lot of people are like, I don't know at the moment. I'm like, well, that's okay. Because like, we both know we're here and let's stay connected. And so I think it's like, it's that combination of being curious and then being there to be like, how can I help? Because I don't know how to help unless you tell me.
Yeah. And a lot of people who use LinkedIn methodologies will use AI tools and they'll set up sequences. And I've tried different techniques, right? Just cold outreach and meeting people. I like it when people want to connect with me and they're not going to sell me something right away. They don't want to have that conversation and it's genuine. And I've tried also doing sequences and I found like it felt really, to me, just because just who I am, it didn't feel authentic to the way that I hold conversations with people. So do you use or have you tried using some of those techniques? Or was it primarily you said, I'm just going to reach out myself to these 20 people and I'm going to look at, certain parameters, whether it's what industry they're in or whatever else.
Yeah. You're exactly. I love AI, but not for creating my business. When I started my business, one of my fundamental values was to create authentic, true connections with clients that are like-minded. So people who want to do good, who want to help people, who are, right, just trying to do their best in this crazy, chaotic world. And I'm not changing lives, I'm not saving lives with presentations, but if I can help one person shine a little brighter or be more confident in their world, right, that ripple effect is huge. And so I apply that to everything I do. So no, I do not do any sequencing. AI has helped me articulate my words better, but I spend every day, to your point, I search and I filter based on what industries I'm interested in, what kind of, also the levels or the job titles are important too, because certain people I need to connect with the right people or else I'm not getting the traction I need, right? Like it's just based on where they're at in their business or what their responsibilities are. And I send an email that is a little custom, but like, it's just like, it's so nice to meet. I love growing my network. This is what I do. I help people this way. How can I help you? Do you have anything? And again, not everybody like writes back, but they'll connect. To your point, I at first started doing the LinkedIn messages and I didn't get as much traction. They were also kind of like the long format, I think. But this quick connect to me is like, it's a no-brainer in a marketing kind of outreach growth opportunity. The more people that follow me, the more they're going to see the value I add. And then I'm going to be top of mind. So some of that hard work of like having to go repeating once we're connected, my LinkedIn work is doing that. But again, I have my old system. If they respond back to me, I have a tracker. I like to follow up, but it's all authentic. It's all real. I guess it's also kind of funny because like I use this theory too. When I met my husband, we met online. And so I've had success online before, but my whole goal when I was online dating and now in LinkedIn is get get on a Zoom, get to face because I don't need to go back and forth on an email. One, as a visual person and a verbal processor, like I want to talk to you. I want you to feel my energy. I want to make sure we're a good fit. And like it's so much easier to say, here's my calendar link, let's talk for 10 minutes than to like, I don't know, when I get emails, they're like, tell me what your mission is or tell me what inspires your why. And I'm like, can we just talk? Look, I don't need to write a novel for you. So that's also some of my approaches.
Yeah. Yeah. All great approaches. And yeah, just thinking about partners, I met mine in person in real life. I'd met him 20 years before. And then I was just going through divorce, and my girlfriend was like, going to take me to a party. And she's like, oh, I don't want you to date anybody or have a boyfriend. But if you're going to, this is the only person I would highly approve of for you. I'm like, you can't say that to me because I will go up and say something in 6 years later.
Yeah. Oh my
So that
God. I
was
love it.
a beautiful in-person story, but I also have found the value of these online connections because I get to stay in my little neighborhood, my suburban LA neighborhood in Redondo Beach, and take my dogs for a walk and have these great conversations with people that may lead to something right now or may lead to something in the future. But at least it's somebody new that I've met, and great things can come out of these connections, like you're saying.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know it's kind of weird. It's it's like it's the mixture of both, but I think that's where going back, like it's got to be for me, it's got to be authentic. I do it. I don't. I know there's apps or there's like programs that can systemize any of that, especially with LinkedIn. Even the way you plan your content and your social media, that's not for me. For me, it's what do I feel like sharing? What do I want to talk about? What am I passionate about today? Because it resonates. And I think that authenticity comes through in the digital space so much. And we can't replace that with any AI system.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm interested beyond niching down to presentations. Do you have industries that you prefer to work with?
So I have been really busy, yes, with finance, pharma, tech. I'm getting into education. But I find that those are the industries with a lot of data and stories to share. And those leaders, like they're really good at presenting. They're not good at designing the story to align to their presentation. And so I don't work on content, so it works out really well. I don't crack content. I'll refine it. But so I'll come in and I'll help with those because those industries have the research, the data, the information, the products development, and they need to get investors or internal teams or board members aligned. And so when you have a strong visual story to align to a really great leader and presentation, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I will co-sign on that. I am not the person who can create something visually, but I love good visuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, here's the content, make it look pretty.
Yeah. Well, we're 65% more likely to retain information when it's visually designed. And I've actually been working with a presentation presenter coach, and she gave me the tip that like, and I never realized this, but when your slides are designed well, it actually becomes your like notes because you have the key things out there really easy to digest as a presenter. So your speaking notes are right there on the slide. You don't necessarily have to have a full script, right? You've got your highlights. And so that becomes so much easier. And then now you're presenting with more confidence and you feel better because you're more excited about what you're sharing and your audience gets it. Yeah, one of my favorite like takeaways is like I have clients who are like they're an investor group and they were having an investor day meeting and they were like nobody asked us to like go back to a data slide and like explain things because the slides were designed to align to their story.
Yeah.
The questions were about what was going to happen with the investment. And they're like, it was the exact right conversations that we wanted versus what we were used to. And so there's so much proof in that power of like we're 67% of leaders are more on board with decision making and alignment when it's visually designed. I mean, and there's just so much neuroscience and understanding how we connect. Now I geek out about all this. I think I should have done psychology and design because there's so much power in it.
There really is. I teach digital media management.
Okay.
So that means a lot of different things, but a large part of what I always emphasize is when the students are creating their presentation for the week, don't have a lot of words. Just use visuals to tell the story, have sparse words, and then have that in your speaker notes if you have speaker notes. The irony is sometimes it can't be helped. I have slides with a lot of content on them, but then I try to impart okay, now we're going to watch a video, or now we're going to look at this visual, or we're going to do something else to kind of get people's minds moving still, even though I'm like, I know this is a lot of information. It's because we're talking about ISPs and CDNs, and I have to show you visually, but I also have to explain all these differences in the two. And, so it's really wonky, but I do love it when I think about when I'm presenting outside of class. I try to be more visual, and I
Yeah.
know how to talk to my slides. And I think that's something that's so important. And it is a missing component for a lot of people.
It's a missing component. And then it's something that, like, I don't know, I wasn't ever taught PowerPoint. I mean, I know I went to design, but like most, businesses, you don't go through a course to learn how to present. You're just expected to know how to use this tool.
Right.
And if you don't use the tool in a way that supports you, you hate it. Really. Like, I used to think PowerPoint was a bad word. I'm not going to lie. But I think it's like a muscle. You have to keep training it. You have to keep practicing. And some of my tips are like, don't start on the computer. Start offline, because when you start with a blank slide, like, that's like so scary and overwhelming. But when you start with a Post-it note and a Sharpie and like what your idea is, whether you write it or you sketch it, and then you put one idea on Post-it notes, you start to craft a story, and now it's modular. And I'm sure you'll have links in the show notes, but I have freebies on my website that are my one pager with my 4 tips, which is my process about knowing your audience, crafting your narrative. And then when you talk about design and exactly what you said, 2 to 3 key takeaways, white space, right?
Yeah.
Giving your audience space to breathe. If you need more slides to tell this thing, that works, because to your point, your brain starts. So there's some tips on there. There's a masterclass recording people can grab. So highly, send people there if they want to continue to like learn or just have resources. I think we always need tips and tricks, because you don't want, again, starting with a blank slide is so overwhelming.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I will have the link to your free resources and your website in the show notes. So thank you for teeing that up. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, artificial intelligence. There are a lot of apps now that will design presentations for you. You upload the verbiage, that part of the content, maybe images if you have, or logos and things like that. Like a lot of things in AI, we're seeing that there are these tools that people use. Some people use them for everything. I'm always on the side of these are tools. They still need that human element, because we are the ones with the creativity, the innovation, the ones who can strategize and think of things. We can use a tool to help us with some of that once we fine tune. Like you said, you might not want to write all of your own posts, but you're not going to just leave it up to AI. It's going to be kind of a thought partner, so that it's your original idea and maybe it just wordsmiths a little bit for you. So
I mean, you were on the same exact page in that. Like, AI is a tool. I'm not scared of it because I use it as a partner, especially as a solopreneur. Like, I don't have a thought. I don't have somebody to bounce ideas off of or to help me. And I'm not a writer. I came from the visual art side. I have a BFA. I have a fine arts degree. So to have a tool that can help me refine or say this shorter is so right. And it takes hours off of my time, so I can do the work I want, or I can take more breaks. But you're right. It's a collaborative. I use it as a brainstorming tool. Give me other ideas, or like, how do I showcase this message in a couple ways, or how would you say it? And it creates that curiosity to like launch something new. I don't think ideas are like, you're not stealing them if you get inspired by them. And so that's what I use AI for. It's inspiration to launch something new. But yes, and I mean, Copilot came out actually, and over the Olympics, they had a commercial, and my kids were really into the Olympics. And my 9-year-old looked at me and was like, "Mom, are they going to take your job away?" And I was like, "No, absolutely not." Like, they may help somebody who needs a deck, but there are a lot of presentations and stories and connections and business needs where a very strategic, intentional, well-planned, crafted narrative needs to be told. And AI is never going to be able to capture that authentic and that emotional connection that is what a presentation is. It's that one-on-one conversation. And we're never going to be able to replace that with AI.
Yeah. You said it perfectly. And particularly in the industries that you're working in, those are industries that are talking about pretty serious things. You don't want to leave financial decks up to AI. You don't want that information released, and there are a lot of standards that have to be met in terms of how you're presenting the data and making sure that you're in alignment with restrictions or,
But also, like, they have a lot of data, but they don't always have to have all the data. Or is it the data that is being highlighted actually showing what they want to focus on? And
Exactly.
that's where my work is, and why I'm not scared to give away my tips and tricks, because there's always so many creative solutions to a problem, but you have to really understand the why, the who, the what, the intention. And that strategic creativity is really, I think, what differentiates me from a lot of other designers and especially from AI.
Wow. Yeah. Fantastic. So you said you have some great tips for us that kind of walk through the process. So I think the other thing is a lot of people think about their benefits for their organization, not what they're providing somebody with.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
sure that's a lot of where you come in as well and say, okay, let's change the storytelling narrative a little bit here and there.
Yeah. So I have a 4-step process that I follow, and it starts with knowing your objectives, understanding your audience, right? What you want them to think, feel, and do. What is this presentation supposed to do? Is it supposed to inform them, persuade them, or just give them an update, right? Those are important. Also, where is it happening? Is it a Zoom meeting? Is it an in-person big, large room? Is it just an updated email? Knowing all of these inputs will help you just kind of start your process of crafting that narrative, which is step 2, with the right intent. Because if you're going to be presenting to the board members or the highest level of your organization, that story is going to look different than if you're talking to your manager or your peers, right? They probably need to know more information. That level of detail changes. Less detail is needed for the higher levels than the lower levels. So again, this is where AI doesn't understand that or know how to craft and pull out that information. So once you know who you're talking to, who your audience is, now we're going to write the narrative. And again, I'm not a content writer, but I love helping people figure that out. I believe in a rule of 4. So you start with the end in mind. Just like when you set a goal, you have a goal, and then you create these milestones to reach it. That's exactly what you do with writing your story. You start with the end in mind. You lay the groundwork for why you're here and what you expect from these people and what you want them to think, feel, and do along the presentation. Then, like a traditional story, you start at the beginning. You set the scene. You tell them what the challenge or the opportunity is. You maybe introduce like a fun narrative or a way to, again, create this emotional, empathetic connection. It could be personal. It could be a joke. It could be anything that just brings you into the space with your audience and lays the groundwork again of like what the topic is. Starting with the end in mind is what you want to do at the end, but you're like really getting into the specifics of why you're here. And then the middle, that's where the meat of this presentation is. You're going to connect the dots and tell your story. You're going to give all those supporting details, the data, the analytics, the visuals that really help to elevate your story. And one of the other notes I say is like these aren't equal parts. The middle is usually hacked the most, right? Starting the beginning and starting with the end in mind, like those might be one slide each, but this is like where a lot of your content is going to be. And once you tell your story and you give all your facts and you support it and you've connected with your audience about what you need to tell them and you've led the conversation, you summarize it. If you're at the end, you drive home that impact. You remind them of those key takeaways that you started or stated along the way. You give them a clear call to action and you reinforce what you need to happen next. So that is the simple process. What I think it helps people do is turn them into, I like to use the term conversation conductors. So just like in an orchestra, when a conductor stands on stage and he tells different sections, when to play, how loud, how soft, right? And they have all these beats and they have the script laid out. That's the notes, but he's really bringing this harmonious experience to life. When you craft your narrative in the right way with the end in mind, then go through the beginning, the middle, and the end, you are creating this harmonious experience and you're laying the beats and the sequence, and your slides support your voiceover. They become your bullet points for your speech. So it creates this really easy and beautiful system.
Yeah, fantastic. What is one of your favorite design tips? Because I think, we tend to err on the side of over design or under design.
Yeah. Great question. So less is always more. And that's actually step 3 of my process is now we've got the visuals. So less is always more. 2 to 3 key things per slide. And white space, I think we mentioned that before. White space is critical. It allows our brains to digest information. It gives us breathing room. But white space doesn't have to be white. White space can be an image that is very subtle. It can be a color. It just needs to be space. Like over communication, over cramming your slides, I believe doesn't show confidence. It causes confusion. So less is always going to be more. Same with when you want to talk about your content and copy. One or two fonts. Headline. Not only are they succinct and short, like headlines in a newspaper article, keep them in the same spot. Create a hierarchy of how you bullet your information or your content. So you have body copy, you have bullet styling, you have bolds, or you have italics, but you want to be consistent. So anytime I see a bullet, it's treated the same way. Our brains will put the puzzle pieces together. When we start to do all these different things and overload, it's going to shut down because it's too much, right? It's like it's fatigued. So that's when it comes to content. Also, like we said, like 30 words per slide, 6 to 8 bullets. That's in a perfect world. You can't always get that. But if you have a lot of content, now we can talk about the visuals. And I do think copy and visuals should be worked together. But if you have a lot of content, you can use color to contain information. You can break up a slide to a left and a right side with a dark and a light background. Even just highlighting information, or I like to do subtle glows of white boxes on white or something like that, or color and color. And it makes this information in this one container kind of just pop out very subtly, very simply. It doesn't create confusion, but it kind of draws attention. And then finally, sorry, I know there's so much to share.
No, this is great.
When you talk about less is more with visuals, being consistent with your image styles. So what kind of photography you're choosing. And if you can't find images that are from the same photo shoot or they're from all over, one of my favorite tricks is turn them black and white, because now you've created a baseline. And so it doesn't overwhelm or take away, because your brand, right? The visual of your brand is so important. So if the images don't align, it's going to feel very chaotic. Icons and illustrations, again, pick a style and be consistent throughout that, because it's so important. You can change the color of the icons if it makes sense with your layout, but when it comes to colors, you want to find your brand colors and you want to use them consistently, especially when it's like, if my headlines are going to be in a color, always treat them in that one or two colors. Don't create a rainbow effect. Like, it's too much. And then less is more with data and your charts, again, and tables. Those are visual cues too. Less is always more. You can remove excess information and labels and lines and tables and stuff, or even in the charts, like, don't have backgrounds. Do you need a chart title? Do you have to use their labeling or their keys? Can you use that in your copy? If you have copy next to a chart and you're talking about product A and product B, what happens if you labeled product A in a color, or you put a bullet by it that's red, and then in the chart it's red? I don't have to label it every time again. Like, our brains, again, will put the puzzle pieces together. It's really magical. So those are that's why I like very fast, but a lot of information to digest.
No, but those are fantastic tips and things that people can think about over and over again as they're listening to this episode and then going to your freebies page. And
yes, right. It helps to see the visual for sure.
Yeah. Fantastic. Is there any other tip or trick that you would think we haven't covered yet, or something that's a new technique, or, something that's tried and true that people should use? Because I know we are overwhelmed by all the bells and whistles and the thoughts of like, oh, this AI tool or that AI tool, or now we can do this, all the different things that are out.
I just default to like, less is always more. Simplicity, consistency, intentionality. And then the other thing is, give yourself time to build it. Like, if you do it the night before, it's really obvious, and you're not going to be simple and consistent, and you're not going to be intentional, and you're going to have too much. But when you give yourself time to build it and craft it and write that narrative, it's so much easier. And you're going to shine when you present it or share it. It's your value and your knowledge is going to come through so much better. So planning ahead is huge.
Amazing. Okay, Emily, I always ask one last question, which is, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, family motto, poem, verse, just words that continue to inspire you every day?
Yeah, so I love this. One that I continue to always tell myself is, if I'm perfect at one thing, be perfect at never giving up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that does it. I have no words. That's just a mic drop right there. So,
oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a good one. It's helped, right? It's helped through the journey. So,
yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you for telling us a little bit about your world, how you got so inspired to be a visual creator, figuring out how to start your own brand, how to niche down, what kind of brands can really utilize this kind of help, and then some really great tips and tricks for all of us to think about when we're thinking about the design elements? Because I'm sure many in the audience, like myself, are not great at designing. We know what we kind of know what we want to see, but we just want somebody else to take it and run with it.
Yes. That's why I'm here. I'm always happy to help. I'm always happy to jump in. I think it's like 1 in 4 presentations has the investment ability to hire somebody like me. So like you can learn from me. You can, use my work as inspiration. Check out my website. I also love to share value add or thoughts or new inspirations and tricks and tips that I'm using on my LinkedIn too, because I do believe that the more you know, the easier to, again, it's that muscle. The more you have in your mind about it and you're aware of it, the easier it is to kind of implement. And it's little things. Start with like making your headlines short and keeping them in one spot and using brand colors. Like those can make a really big difference.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their journey, their story with you. Emily's information will be in the show notes. So you can get those freebies. You can find out how to connect with her on LinkedIn. And I know a lot of listeners are in the industries that you're talking about. So hopefully you'll have a couple of people reach out to you from.
Yes, I would love to. Always happy to connect with new folks. That's the best. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbandamplified.com.